The glass caught my eye before she did. It was already there, at my spot, half full of orange juice, the kind I liked. The glass was sweating gently in the morning light, little beads running down like it had been waiting longer than I had. I hadn't poured it. That's what caught me first. I always pour it. The air in the kitchen felt too still, like the house was holding its breath. The blinds were only half open, letting in that thin autumn gold, the kind that makes everything look softer than it feels. Toast had burned a little in the toaster, and the smell clung to the corners of the room. Marissa stood across the table, buttering a piece of bread, not looking up. Her movements were quiet, almost too precise. I watched the light catch on the edge of her cheek, glowing warm, but her face was cold, still. The kind of still that doesn't ask questions and won't tolerate any. I didn't sit down. Not right away. My hands stayed at my sides. My heart beat a little faster, but my feet stayed planted. That juice on the table felt like a message, not a gesture, like she wanted to move the morning forward without me having a say in it. Like something had already been decided before I even stepped into the room. I looked at her, then at the juice again and thought, this is how it starts, isn't it? Quiet, casual, and far too polite. She sat down, her fork moving through her eggs like it was any other day. I sat, finally, the chair creaking under me in that familiar way. I reached for my toast, but my appetite was elsewhere. She shuffled a napkin, folded it once, then again. She looked down, not at me. You're just too much now, she said. Not angry, not even annoyed, just flat, like a fact on the back of a cereal box. I felt something inside me tighten, not from what she said, but from how she said it. Like I was a task she didn't sign up for, a guest who overstayed. She didn't say it to hurt me. That would have been easier, in a way. But she said it like she meant to be reasonable, like being tired of your own mother was something logical, something tidy. I couldn't speak. Not yet. I turned toward the drawer behind me. The bread knife sat inside, same as it had for years. I was supposed to slice the bread, something I always did. Ritual, routine. But my hand hovered. The drawer handle felt colder than usual, or maybe it was just me. I thought about how many mornings I'd stood in that same spot, slicing, spreading, setting, hundreds, maybe thousands. And now I stood there unsure, my fingers stiff at the joints, wondering if routine had become intrusion. Was I too much then? I let the drawer stay closed. Instead, I sat back down and picked up my fork. Not because I was hungry, but because it gave my hands something to do. Marissa was eating slowly, methodical. Bites, quiet chews. I started counting them. 1, 2, 3. I couldn't help it. I needed the rhythm. I didn't taste my eggs. I don't even remember moving them across the plate. But the scrape of my fork felt loud. Too loud. Like it was betraying me, exposing. Me as still present. She chewed steadily, barely pausing, eyes down. The same girl who used to swing her legs beneath this table while I poured syrup on her pancakes. The same girl who once painted the corner of this table with purple nail polish and blamed it on a ghost. Now she barely blinked in my direction. I turned toward my coffee, letting the steam rise to meet my face. The cup felt heavy in my hands. I used to love the smell, rich, warm, familiar. Now it smelled like distance. She was scrolling through her phone, thumb flicking fast, screen lighting up her face. Her eyes didn't rise once. They darted left to right, lost in something far away from here. She didn't ask how I slept, didn't ask what I had planned, didn't even pretend to see me. Those same eyes used to search mine after dance recitals, scraped knees, bad report. Cards. They used to light up when I walked into a room, but today I might as well have been part of the furniture. When she finished her last bite, she stood up, plate in hand. No words. No, Thank you. Just the soft sound of her slippers brushing across the tile. Her chair scraped back and stayed that way. Her footsteps padded up the stairs until they faded completely. I stayed. I looked at her plate. Half finished. Eggs, butter knife resting crooked, napkin crumpled beside the rim. I reached out and swept the crumbs into my palm. They were still warm. Such a small thing, crumbs. But something about it made my chest ache, like I was gathering up the pieces of what I used to mean, little leftovers of something that once mattered. I carried her plate to the sink. Wash it. Gently. My fingers worked slowly over the porcelain, and then I poured the juice down the drain. I knelt down slower than I used to, my knees complaining just a little as they touched the cold hallway floor. The house was quiet, midnight kind of quiet, where even the walls seemed to wait with me. I reached under the edge of the closet, my hand sliding into that familiar groove, and there it was, that loose plank. It gave under my fingers, just slightly, like it remembered me. I paused. Let the smell rise first, cedar and dust, soft and musty, like time had folded itself in there. I hadn't opened it in years, but my hands still knew what to do. The board tilted back, revealing the corner of the old shoebox I'd tucked beneath. I didn't know exactly what I needed, only that I needed something that hadn't shifted while the rest of my world had. My fingers curled around the box, slow and deliberate. It felt cooler than I expected, and lighter too. That struck me. Either the box had shrunk, or I had. I lifted it gently, almost cradling it to my chest. My sleeve brushed away a thin layer of dust, the way I used to wipe flour from the countertop when the girls were little. My hands shook more now, but the movement felt the same. The lid creaked a little as I opened it. Inside, the paper was soft with age, edges curled, colors dulled. Still, I could see Claire's handwriting, those looping letters, the way she always dotted her I's too high, and just like that it whispered, not loudly, just the rustle of old secrets, old love, waiting where I'd left them. The first letter smelled faintly of lavender, like the sachet I tucked in with it years ago. I brought it close to my face and closed my eyes. For a moment I could hear her voice again. "Do you ever feel invisible?" she had once written. Even then, she was the only one who asked the kind of questions that sat in the corners of a room. I remember staring at that sentence for a long time, back when I first read it. I didn't know what to say, not because I didn't feel it, but because I did, more than I wanted to admit. Even now, all these years later, my throat tightened. Her words hadn't aged. They still had that soft lilt, that lightness that didn't come from innocence, but from sincerity. She was always sincere. I held the letter close, letting the edges touch my fingers. I read the whole thing again, even though I'd memorized it long ago. My lips moved as I read, though no sound came out, and when I reached the end, I sat back and finally let myself feel the truth of it all. I told myself, back then, that I hid the letters to protect Claire. Marissa would have mocked them. She never understood the softness Claire carried. Claire felt too much, asked too much, needed a kind of gentleness I didn't always know how to offer out loud. So I kept her letters tucked away, safe. But tonight, as I sat there on the floor, the paper trembling slightly in my hands, I knew that wasn't the full truth. I kept them, hidden because I was afraid of what it would say about me, that I had room for one child's tenderness, but not the other's demands. Afraid of how it might tip the scale, expose the parts of myself I hadn't parented equally. I wanted to believe love looked the same for both. But maybe it didn't. Maybe Claire needed words, and Marissa needed order, and I gave more order than I did words. The guilt sat beside me like an old friend, quiet, familiar. One letter sat at the bottom of the box, folded a little tighter than the rest. It was the last one Claire had written before she moved away. I knew what it said. I'd only read it once. I opened it carefully. Her handwriting was smaller, neater. It ended with, "It's okay if you don't write back. I just wanted you to know I see you." I had folded it then, too afraid to respond, too ashamed maybe, or too unsure what it meant to be seen in a way you hadn't earned. Tonight, I read it again under the dull glow of the hallway light. I didn't cry, but I whispered her name into the quiet. Claire. It floated out of me without thinking. Barely a sound. I wanted her to hear it, wherever she was. I wanted her to know I had kept every word she gave me, even when I didn't know how to give anything back. The hallway felt like it was holding its breath. I sat a little longer, letting the silence wrap around me. Letting her words echo, soft and steady, like they were always meant to come back when I needed them most. It sat on the counter, tilted just enough to catch my eye. The cap was off, not loose, not half-twisted. Off. The label had turned inward, like it didn't want to be seen. I stood still for a second, unsure what I was looking at, what I was feeling. My fingers brushed the rim of the bottle, cold, slick. The condensation left a ghost of my touch behind. I hadn't touched it that day. I knew that. I remembered every time I'd taken one, how it felt in my throat, how it sat in my stomach. I hadn't today, but the bottle was open. Something shifted in me. Don't panic, not yet, just this soft, hollow knocking behind my ribs, like a warning trying to decide if it should whisper or shout. Marissa was rinsing something in the sink when I turned to her. "Did you take the bottle out?" I asked, voice calm, too calm. She looked up too fast. Her smile flickered, flat and thin, like a shadow of itself. "You must have already taken them, Mom." She said it like she was reciting it, not recalling it. Her hands told a different story. They were dry, knuckles raw from the cold maybe, twisting the edge of the dish towel like it had something to say. The water from the tap was still running, even though nothing was under it. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. My heart didn't race. It paused. I looked back at the bottle, then at her. Something inside me clicked, but I stayed still. I had learned that silence sometimes holds more power than confrontation, especially when you're not sure what's really unfolding. I reached for the bottle slowly, tilting it just enough to count. 1, 2, 3, gone. 3 pills were missing. I hadn't taken a single one. I counted again, and again. Each time, slower than the last. My breath shortened. My palms grew clammy. I pressed one hand against the counter, cool and steady beneath my fingertips, and let the weight of the truth begin to settle. I stood there, motionless, like if I moved, something inside me might break loose, and then I remembered. 2 nights ago, I made a tea latte. Marissa had walked into the kitchen and just stood there, staring. She didn't say a word, didn't smile, just watched me. At the time, I'd thought maybe she was worried. Maybe she saw something I didn't. But now that memory returned, with sharper edges. She hadn't been worried. She'd been watching. I wasn't sure what had shifted between us, or when, but I knew in that moment that something had happened. I wanted to ask her. I wanted to hold up the bottle and demand she tell me exactly what happened, but I didn't. Instead, I picked up the cap, cool and round in my hand, and twisted it back on, slow and quiet. My mother taught me that you don't stir the water unless you know which way the current flows. That you don't confront a storm until you know where it's headed, and right then, I didn't. But I felt the wind change. I knew something was coming. That evening, after the kitchen had gone still and the house had settled into its usual creaks, I sat at my dresser. I reached behind the mirror and pulled out an old notebook, faded cover, spine cracked. I opened it to a blank page and wrote the date, then the time, then the word 3. That's all I wrote. Just enough to remember later, just in case my own mind started playing tricks. The pen shook in my hand, but my heart didn't. There was something steady in it, like setting the table even when you know no one's coming. A quiet ritual that says, I'm not powerless. I closed the notebook, tucked it back where it lived, and looked at my own reflection in the mirror. I didn't look scared. I looked ready. Whatever was shifting in this house, I would see it clearly, and I would remember every word, every glance, every bottle. It used to smell like cinnamon and starch, like my hands. Every year, I'd boil the linens with a pinch of vinegar and press them flat until the edges waved just slightly, soft and proud. That tablecloth knew our stories. It had gravy stains from the year Marissa knocked over the ladle and embroidered initials I stitched after Claire's third-grade play. But that year, it didn't come out of the linen drawer. Instead, Marissa unfolded something plastic from a store bag, crisp, too bright, with little printed leaves that had no memory. It crinkled as she shook it out, loud and unfeeling. She smoothed it with the palm of her hand like a hotel maid, fast and perfect. I watched her tuck the corners sharp and flat, like she was erasing the room of anything soft. She didn't look at me once. She didn't ask where the old one was, and I didn't offer. Maybe she thought I'd forgotten it. Maybe she hoped I had. I stood in the doorway, the scent of sage and roasting turkey pulling at something in my chest that didn't belong in that room anymore. She turned toward me and smiled, tight, like it had been rehearsed in the mirror. You're always tired, just rest today. She said it like she meant well, like she was doing me a favor. But rest doesn't feel like rest when someone hands it to you like an excuse. I looked down at my hands. They weren't carrying anything. Not the deviled eggs, not the tray of cornbread, not even the folded napkins I usually shaped into little fans, just empty. The kitchen behind her buzzed with life, clattering pans, something sizzling in the oven, Claire humming softly as she mashed sweet potatoes. But where I stood, in the hallway just outside the door, there was only carpet underfoot and a quiet place too deep for a holiday. I didn't argue. I just nodded. I counted them twice, 5 plates, laid out neatly, forks angled just right, napkins folded the way I used to teach them, ironic, really. Everything in its place, except me. I watched Marissa pass by the cabinet. I waited for her. To pause, to glance at the space where the 6th plate should have gone. She didn't. She never intended to set it, because it wasn't forgotten. It was excluded. I stood just out of sight, near the hallway mirror, where I could still see everything, in the reflection. Claire laughed with her mouth full. Marissa straightened her blouse before she sat down. The baby cooed in its high chair, smudging peas across the tray. I saw the wine poured, the glasses raised, and I saw the moment they toasted. To my family, Marissa said. They clinked glasses. Touched the edge of the wall beside me. Just for balance, just to feel something solid. There was no pause, no glance down the hall. No one is missing. My chair wasn't empty. It had simply vanished, and something inside me, something soft, closed quietly, like a window that finally gave in to the breeze. I smelled it before I saw it. The cranberry sauce, my old recipe, the one with orange zest and cloves. The one I taught her to make when she was barely tall enough to stir the pot without splashing. I could smell it from where I stood. Sweet, sharp, familiar. But no one said my name. No one mentioned the secret I always whispered while it simmered. That little dash of cinnamon you couldn't taste but would miss if it were gone. They used it. They loved it. But I wasn't part of it anymore. I had become the thing they borrowed, but no longer invited. I walked away before the pie came out, before the second helpings, before anyone noticed I was still there. My steps were slow, careful. I didn't want the floorboards to creak, didn't want to be the sound that interrupted their joy. I closed my bedroom door gently, holding the knob, all the way until it latched without a click. The room was dim, shadows stretching long across the quilt like tired arms. I sat on the edge of the bed and folded my hands in my lap, not like a grandmother, like a guest, in a house I used to call mine. Had just folded my nightgown along the edge of the bed. Cotton, pale blue, still warm from the dryer. I smoothed it like I always did, creases flattened just so, neckline resting over the pillow. The room smelled like lavender lotion and clean linens. Familiar, safe. Then the phone rang. It startled me. It had been days since anyone called, and for a moment, I thought maybe it was the wrong number. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for it. Not from age, just from the unexpectedness of it all. Claire. Her name glowed softly on the screen. I hesitated only for a breath, then answered. She didn't say hello right away, just a breath. One long exhale, then, "Something doesn't feel right." Her voice cracked in that old familiar way, the same way it used to when she scraped her knee or lost a friend in middle school. She always tried not to cry, but you could hear it anyway. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the phone pressed close to my ear as if proximity could make up for time. I didn't ask what she meant. I just listened. There were little sounds in the background, a tea kettle clicking off, a dog barking faintly somewhere. Life happened around her while she worried about me. She hadn't been here in weeks, and yet, she knew. The words built in my throat like steam. The pills, the missing plate, the way the silence in this house had grown edges. I wanted to hand it all to her, my pile of folded grief. Lay it out in front of her the way I used to fold her. Dresses for Sunday school, but I couldn't. She wasn't ready to carry it. And maybe I wasn't ready to let it go. "Are you okay?" she asked after a pause. I hesitated. "I'm all right." The word didn't lie exactly, but it left out too much. Her voice softened then, like a blanket being tucked around me. "Did you eat today?" I smiled without meaning to. "I made some soup," I said, which was true. I just hadn't eaten it. "Mm-hmm," she murmured. She didn't press. She never did. Claire had the kind of love that waited in the hallway, gently knocking, never barging in. It wasn't the soup that warmed me. It was the way she asked, like she wasn't checking a box, like she really wanted to know. After we hung up, I sat for a while in the quiet. No music. No TV, just the faint hum of the heater and the rhythm of the clock beside my bed. Then I reached into the drawer and pulled out my little green notebook. I opened to a clean page and wrote the words she'd said. "Something doesn't feel right." I underlined it twice. Not because I was scared, but because someone saw me. Someone noticed. That was enough to keep me breathing. That night, I lay on my side beneath the quilt and stared at the shadowy shapes on the ceiling. For the first time, in weeks I didn't feel cold. Her voice stayed with me, not loud, not demanding, just there. Like a light left on in the hallway, just in case I woke up afraid. The cold bit first. It always did. The wind found the gap between my scarf and coat collar, sent a chill right down to my chest like it remembered the map of me. But then, just as quick, it let go. Like it knew I could handle it now. My boots crunched over the frozen leaves, each step letting out a little crackle. The path ahead was dusted in frost, thin and silver, like someone had powdered the world in quiet. My breath came out in little clouds, soft, round puffs that disappeared before I could watch them drift too far. And my knees? Well, they reminded me I was still here. that I was still moving, not for anyone else, just me. James always took the shortcut, the path that cut across the back fence, past the old shed with the tin roof. He liked efficiency, though walking was for exercise, not reflection. But that morning, I turned the other way. I didn't want to be quick. I wanted wide turns and quiet curves. I needed time to listen to the quieter parts of myself. The ones I hadn't let speak in a while. The crows called out in the trees above, raspy and distant. Even they seemed unbothered by me. The trail curved gently, like a memory I wasn't rushing to reach. And there it was. The bench. Our bench. It sat right where we left it, weather-worn and waiting. The wood was a little greener with moss, the nails rusted at the corners, but it held its shape. I brushed off a layer of frost with my sleeve. The cold soaked through the fabric, but I didn't mind. I lowered myself down slowly, knees protesting, but not enough to stop me. The stream below gurgled gently, breaking over the smooth rocks we once tossed together. It sounded just the same, just quieter. I half expected to hear James humming beside me. He always had a tune, even when he didn't know the words. But this time, it was just me. And the silence? It didn't ache. It waited. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small leather journal I had tucked there. It had stayed. Empty for months, years really. Still smelled like the paper store, like a promise. I opened it and let the pages fall open on my lap. I wrote the date first. My hand shook a little, but the ink dried steady. Then I wrote one line. I want to feel like myself again. That's all. The wind brushed across my cheek, and I breathed it in like permission, and then I kept going, page after page. The words didn't come out polished. They didn't rhyme or rise. They just came. Tumbled out of me like pebbles from a coat pocket I'd forgotten were there. I didn't write to explain. I didn't write to defend. I wrote because I was still here. And that had to mean something, Delay. Wind picked up, not enough to shiver, just enough to rustle the trees above me. The sound of the stream wove into the quiet like it always had. Background, not center. When I closed the journal, I didn't look back at the pages. I didn't need to. I stood slowly and started back the way I came, but I didn't rush. Each step was deliberate, each crackle underfoot a small, steady reminder. I get to choose the pace now. The breeze followed me, gentle at my back. I didn't look back at the bench. I didn't have to. Some places stay with you, even when you only visit once. I had just turned off the oven when I heard it. 3 soft knocks. No urgency. Not the kind that came with packages or neighbors needing sugar. Just gentle. Like someone asking permission to be let into more than just the house. The kitchen still smelled like baked apples, sweet and warm with a hint of cinnamon in the air. The light stretched across the floor in long golden strips, making everything feel a little softer, a little slower. I didn't rush, but something fluttered in my chest before my feet even moved. When I opened the door, there she was, Claire. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, hair a little wild from the wind, and in her hands, wrapped in foil, still warm, was a lemon pie. She didn't say much, just gave me that small smile, the one she'd had since she was a girl. The kind that said, I know more than I'm letting on. She stepped inside like she belonged there, and in a way she always had. She placed the pie on the counter without a word. The scent, citrus and sugar, filled the kitchen in seconds. It mingled with the apple and cinnamon, and for a moment, it felt like a holiday that didn't need a name. She looked around the room, not like someone admiring furniture, but like someone checking to make sure the bones of something were still there. Her eyes lingered on the fridge, the sink, the dish towel still folded on the stove. Then they landed on me. Not like she was looking at me, like she was finding me. She didn't ask what was wrong. She already knew. She cut 2 slices, quick and practiced. like we'd done 100 times before. She didn't ask if I wanted one. She knew I did. We sat across from each other, fork to fork. No phones, no rush, just pie. I tasted lemon first, sharp and bright. The zest hit my tongue like sunlight in the middle of a long shadow, and suddenly my eyes stung. Not from the flavor, but from everything we hadn't said in months. I want to change the deed. I hadn't meant to say it, but the words rose like steam off a kettle, sudden and soft, but impossible to stop. They sat there, between us, floating. Claire didn't flinch, didn't blink. She just looked at me and let the words have space. I want the house in your name, I added, barely above a whisper. I searched her face for judgment, for concern, for something. But what I found was stillness. And maybe, just maybe, a flicker of relief. She didn't speak. She reached for my hand. It crossed the space between us like a promise. Her palm was warm, steady. The last time she held my hand like that, she was 5 years old, lost in a grocery store aisle, eyes wide with fear. That day, her fingers clung to mine like they were the only thing keeping her from floating away. Now, they said something softer, but just as strong. I'm here. I've got you. We didn't say anything else for a while. We just sat. And when she finally stood to leave, the room didn't feel empty. That night, I washed the plates by hand. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. I moved slowly, carefully. The sponge traced the curve of each plate like a goodbye to the day, not a chore. The house didn't echo. It held something. Her scent lingered, something floral, maybe her conditioner. The pie box still sat on the counter, half closed, and in the quiet, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. I placed the manila folder on the coffee table like a teacup, careful, steady. The papers inside were cold against my palms, even though they had cost me nothing but warmth to prepare. Signatures, stamps, notarized choices. I didn't look at them again. I didn't need to. The living room was quiet, bathed in late afternoon gold, the kind of light that used to make everything in this house feel soft. Today, it felt sharp. Still. The clock on the mantel ticked like it was waiting for someone to interrupt it. I didn't speak. Neither did she. But something had already shifted. Marissa reached for the folder like it held the end of a story she didn't know she was in. Her fingers moved too quickly, sliding pages over one another, barely reading, just scanning, hoping maybe that she was wrong about what she already felt in her chest. Each turn of the page brought a new knot to her brow. By the third page, she stopped pretending to be calm. She looked up, just briefly, and I watched the moment it hit her. It was already done, already signed. Her lips parted like she might speak, but nothing came out right away. And then, there it was. You gave it to her? Not yelled. Not even angry, just stunned, wounded, like the air had left the room and she didn't know how to fill it again. I hadn't expected that tone. I'd expected a storm, a raised voice at the very least. What I got instead was something quieter, sadder, emptier. She looked like someone I used to know, the girl I used to braid ribbons into before picture day. The girl who once cried because her friend wouldn't sit with her at lunch, but that girl was gone. And this woman, sitting across from me now, I couldn't mother that silence. I folded my hands in my lap. I gave it to Claire, I said softly, because she never called me a burden. The words didn't tremble. They came out like I'd rehearsed them in my heart every night for weeks. And I had, not for drama, not for revenge, for truth. They stood there between us, like a stone laid, gently across the table, not thrown, just placed. She looked down, then away, not in the folder. Not at me, at nothing. The room fell into that kind of silence I knew too well. It was the kind that comes after something breaks, and no one's sure what's shattered. No yelling, no pacing, just the weight of what had been spoken. It reminded me of the night James told me he was ready to stop fighting. The way we sat in that same room, neither of us saying much. Both of us knew something had changed forever. I didn't try to fill it. Some silences are meant to stay still. I reached for the folder, picked it up with both hands, careful not to bend the edges. I used to gather Claire's report cards like this, pressing them flat, sliding them into drawers like they were treasures. That's what this was now, a quiet treasure, a truth I had chosen. I didn't wait for Marissa to say anything. I didn't need her permission, or her apology. The house didn't feel like mine anymore, but I did. She knocked with her knuckles, light and easy. That gentle, hopeful knock she always used when she didn't want to startle me. When I opened the door, Claire stood there with a paint brochure in one hand and a tall glass of iced tea in the other. Her hair was pulled back and her cheeks were pink from the sun. She held out the color samples like they were flowers. I thought maybe the porch could use a little color, she said. But we both knew she meant more than the porch. It had been years since I picked out a color for anything. Years since anyone asked me what I liked. She sat on the porch rail, sipping her tea as I flipped through the pages. So many shades of blue. I stopped on one called Quiet River. That one, I said. It feels calm. Claire smiled. Then that's the one. The next morning, we painted. Claire wore her old high school sweatshirt, and I tied a dish towel around my hair like I used to when I baked pies. The roller splashed across our shoes, sending stripes of blue up our ankles like lazy brushstrokes on skin. We laughed, really laughed, the kind that bubbles up without warning and doesn't need a reason. The paint dried faster than we expected, catching the golden light just right. It wasn't perfect, some spots too thick, others still streaky, but it looked alive. The porch hadn't felt like mine in a long while, but that day it did. As the sun dropped lower, the wind picked up just enough to stir the old copper chimes above the swing. James had picked those out one summer at a roadside flea market. They don't sing loud, he'd said, but they've got good manners. They never made much sound, just a soft, breathy song, like someone sighing gently in another room. That evening, I heard them again, just a whisper of melody brushing past the doorframe. I leaned back in my chair, eyes closed, and let the sound settle into my chest. And for a moment, I could feel him there, not as a memory. As a presence. We didn't need to talk after that. Claire sipped her tea, and I ran my hand over the new paint. Smooth, cool, still tacky in places. I didn't point out the drip on the corner. She didn't mention the spot we missed under the railing. The silence wasn't heavy. It held us like a quilt stitched from old pieces of who we were and new pieces of who we were becoming. The porch swing creaked behind us, lazy and familiar. The house breathed with us. After she left, I found the old candle box under the kitchen sink. I had to move a few forgotten pans to reach it. The wax was dusty. The matches tucked inside had curled a little with time. I chose the smallest one, short, with a wick already blackened once. It didn't take much. One strike, one flick of light. I set it in the window above the sink, the same place I used to light a candle every Sunday night, just before James came in from locking the garage. It wasn't for show. It was for warmth, for memory, for us. I hadn't lit one since he passed, but that night I wanted the house to glow again, even if only softly. I stepped outside and looked back through the window. The candle flickered steady in its glass holder. Golden. Still, I didn't expect magic. I didn't need it, but I felt something shift anyway. The porch was cooler now, the air carrying the scent of honeysuckle and fresh paint. Crickets had begun their slow chorus, a kind of gentle applause from the trees, and standing there, I realized the house wasn't just where I lived, It was home again. It arrived on a Thursday, tucked between grocery ads and a magazine I didn't subscribe to. I almost missed it, almost tossed it with the rest until I saw the handwriting. Marissa's. Those same loops and long slants she had as a teenager, only smaller now, more restrained. Like she didn't want to take up too much space. I stood at the kitchen table, one hand still resting on the mail pile. I didn't open it right away. I just looked at it, let the paper warm in my palm. The sun peeked through the front window, casting long lines of light across the floor. Outside, a few birds traded songs across the yard. I pulled out a chair and sat. Just me, the envelope, and the space between us. Inside was a card, simple, pale blue. No flowers, no glitter. I opened it slowly, half bracing myself for words I didn't want. An explanation, a defense, a neatly packaged regret. But there was none of that. Just one word in the center. Mom. No, dear. No, I'm sorry. Just Mom. I stared at it for a long time. My eyes moved over the shape of each letter, the slight pressure where her pen had pressed harder on the M. I ran my finger over the ink like it might still be drying, like maybe if I touched it gently enough, I'd hear her voice again, the way she used to say it when she was little, tired, needing something only I could give. That word hadn't passed her lips in so long. Not without a bite, not without distance, and now it was here. Plain, unwrapped. I didn't read it. I didn't build a story around it, but I felt it. Without really thinking, I walked over to the drawer by the stove, the one where I kept old recipes and handwritten notes I couldn't throw away. Claire's lemon pie recipe sat on top. I reached in and set Marissa's card right beside it. 2 daughters, 2 different kinds of care. One stayed, one had wandered. But both lived in that drawer now, and somehow that felt like enough. I didn't cry, but something in me shifted, quietly, like a knot loosening without anyone pulling. It didn't feel like forgiveness, not the kind you declare, more like settling. A small sigh in the chest, like when the afternoon light moves from one wall to another and you realize you're still here, still standing. The birds outside were louder now. The screen door creaked in the breeze and the clock ticked gently above. The pantry. I let it all happen around me. I stood at the sink and washed a cup. That's all, just warm water. A little soap, my own 2 hands. It wasn't remarkable, but it felt steady, like I had nothing to prove, like I didn't have to hold my breath anymore. That's the thing about dignity. It doesn't shout. It waits. It walks with you quietly. And sometimes you don't even know it's there until you realize you never truly let it go. I rinsed the cup, set it in the rack, and let the water run over my fingers a little longer than needed. Then I dried my hands on the old dish towel, the one with faded strawberries at the corners. I didn't rush to call her. I didn't rush to close the drawer either. I left the window cracked just a little, enough for air, enough for maybe. Not every relationship needs mending. Some need space. Room to stretch, to bend without breaking. Sometimes love doesn't come back with flowers or speeches. Sometimes it comes in the form of a single word on paper, and sometimes that's enough. The curtain fluttered in the breeze. I could smell. The grass outside, the soil, the sunlight warms the porch, and I thought, let time do what time does. Let what wants to come home find its way. I don't need every wound to close loud. Some can close softly, and some can stay open just wide enough to let a little light in. Sometimes healing doesn't knock. It just leaves a quiet envelope on your doorstep. If you've ever held onto a word that meant more than it said, I'd love to hear your story below. And if these moments speak to you, you're always welcome to stay a while and subscribe.